without any preamble, I'm just going to bring Troy on because I have a little discussion I want to have with you guys. Because shit is fucking funny in life. I will tell you that. Like, oh my fucking gourd. And it didn't move the thing. Of course it didn't. Why would it do that? Okay. Professional as fuck. How are you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm doing great.
It's awesome. So, during the intro, we were talking about what had happened. What happened in the last couple of days. Some of you know that I started another podcast on the side. And by started, I mean, I have it conceptualized and it's ready to go. It's called Destiny's Not Dead. And I've done like a soft episode 0, proof of concept, if you will. I don't know what it was about last night, but on the Destiny's Not Dead Twitter account, I got like 20 to 40 replies of people going, yeah, it is. Like that was their whole shtick. And because of the attention and spread that got, it actually doubled the followers that we had. And I checked it. It's not the people that were replying. And it was like, so I have something to say to anybody who's replying negatively to the Destiny's Not Dead Twitter account. Thanks for the free advertising. And if that's really your entire argument, shove it up your ass. Like, bring some intelligence and rationale, or just hang on to your mommy's dress and go to the store. It's fine.
Well, I mean, it's both the beautiful and terrible thing about having an opinion, and especially with, like people like us, where we can think enough to back up that opinion. Like out of the woodwork, you get all these people who like misconstrue or intentionally misconstrue what you say. And it's just like, you don't even fucking get it.
No, like, most of the time they don't. And that's the thing that is like, on one hand, I find hilarious. On the other hand, I find it to be kind of tragic too. Like I didn't tell you this one. This person replied to that picture we talked about. Okay, for those of you who don't know, we put a picture up. By we, I mean me and beer. We put this picture up of 3 guardians, a warlock, a titan, and a hunter. And it just says, in very bold text, if you used to be a guardian, you never were. This is a take on an old phrase, if you used to be punk, you never were. And it was inspired by something our friend Beard Grizzly did on his channel, which was kind of slamming people that are being negative for the sake of being negative about the game. And the picture was meant to do the same thing. It was meant to make people think, like, am I being a dick about this shit? And it certainly struck a chord. And some people were like, oh, you mean my 1,000 hours of Destiny didn't count? I'm like, what? It does, actually. Just calm your tits, dude. And so the first episode is going to just be me explaining that picture. But there's a reply to that picture on Twitter. It says, yikes. Nothing more, nothing less. And I just went. So I replied with a question mark. And they replied to, it's a cringe picture. First of all, that word needs to go the fuck away. So my reply was, people still say cringe? His reply was, people still play Destiny and do spoofs of God's Not Dead. I'm like, you referenced that movie? Did you really just reference that movie? And I put a slow clap. I was like, like, dude, like I didn't know that movie existed until I saw Cinema Snob do his review of it. That's the only way I would ever like I'd kind of stay away from religious propaganda. Go figure, right? And I guess it was a pretty big movie and shit. So whatever. But it was like that was your big comeback, bro. Like, all right, cool. It just the internet will never not be funny.
Truth.
So I just wanted to get that off my chest. So welcome to the Grindhead podcast, episode 14. I was there. Video games part 2, arcades, starring Quarters and this man Skeletroy Blockbuster.
Hi-yo.
So arcade, we're just gonna hop right into it because we have a tendency to talk forever. So like arcades predate the console by a lot, by a good decade or so. The first arcade games came out in the 70s, and then it was Pong. That was the thing. Like the guys that would later become Atari, or Atari, depending on where you come from. Sorry, can't help it. Created Pong, and it made them like oodles and oodles of money in quarters. And then as more and more games and more companies grew, like the places that now were nothing but the arcades, like arcade cabinets, that was all they did. Whereas before, it first started out like coin out games like in a bar or something like that. What's your first memory of an arcade game? Playing one, to your knowledge?
Well, I don't know. It's weird because like you just doing that intro kind of made other memories flood back in, because like I think that I may have played like an arcade game at like a restaurant or a bar or something. Like
Sure.
It would have been something super simple, like
Right.
like Galaxian, but that obviously wasn't a strong enough memory to take hold. My very first actual memory of playing an arcade game in an arcade was the Robocop game.
Oh, yes. I actually recorded footage of myself playing the MAME of that about a year ago, and I watch the video sometimes if I'm ever feeling down, because there's like such joy on my face. It's pretty good. It's good shit.
Yeah,
So,
and I mean, like, I have such a clear memory of that time. Just because, like, it was such a new experience to me. Not to get off on too much of a tangent already.
come on,
but
dude.
you know, like,
it's par for course.
as you know, as we kind of explained in the last episode, like, I mean, I've been playing games since as long as I can remember, with Atari and, you know, moving straight to the NES.
Sure.
But the arcade was so different. Everything was bigger and brighter and louder.
And when you're a kid, you don't have your own disposable income, not with any great degree anyway. You know, there's allowances and whatnot. Maybe you've got a paper route or something, maybe. But when you're a little kid especially, it's like if they give you that quarter, you get to pick that one game. It becomes the most stressful moment of your life. You're like, which one am I going to play? And then you go up to one, you're like, oh, I picked this one. They're like, it's $1 to play. And you're like, fuck. You may not even know the word fuck yet, but you're like, whatever a kid would say, yeah, like whatever the equivalent is, you know, but in your head it's like, fuck. I remember, like, I'm sure that I played like Pac-Man or something in an arcade. I'm certain of this, right? But my first, like a solid memory, like I can see myself almost outside my body, like third person, I can remember this, was playing a Gorf cabinet at a pool. And I specifically remember that Gorf shocked me. Literally. Like like I went, I mean, it's an arcade cabinet poolside. What do you think's gonna happen? You know? And I remember I only got to play it once. My mom gave me a quarter, and then it didn't work. So I'm pretty sure that I shorted out the machine, in hindsight. But it was fun, you know. And the cabinet. I remember the feeling of the cabinet was almost like sandy. Like I don't know. You know what I mean? Like there's this weird and as a kid, the first time you feel something, it's like because if you've never experienced something like that before, it's like, well, you try to approximate it to something else. And in my case, it felt like sand. That memory never left. Like I can feel it on my hands now, and it's creepy. Ew. It's pretty cool. I also remember, like you said, an actual arcade. This would have been, because I would play like a game like a Pizza Hut or something, because the Pizza Huts where we were in the East Coast always had something. So you know, occasionally you'd get like a Pac-Man or a Zaxxon or something. But I remember distinctly there was like a Chucky Cheese. I'm not sure if it was Chucky Cheese or a Putt Putt. I take that back. It was Chucky Cheese now. Because here's the only way I know I can verify this memory. my parents would go to Chucky Cheese for shit when we were in Ohio, which is when I was younger. Somehow, we abandoned Chucky Cheese for mini putt-putt and when we moved to Virginia. Like, those are two very different things. And I remember, like, wanting to rush the fuck through the putt-putt game so we could all go play games. And after, like I've been to a few parties with my friends, some for me, some for other people. And, like, the next year, we all agreed to ask our parents to, like, fuck the putt-putt. Let's get more... Can we say fuck putt-putt and just get more tokens and play games? And, of course, the answer was, well, why would you want to do that? You know, that's your... like, you guys should be doing something for your birthday, not just playing games or whatever. And, of course, we were like, no, fuck that. You know. And we ended up playing a lot of that. So I remember, like, you know, the Star Wars Vector game. Did you ever get a chance to play that in your arcade? Yeah, there's that one. So years later, when I see the Star Wars arcade game that it has, like, the walkers in it and shit, my mind was like, you know, blown. You remember Robocop? I do too. We've both had great experiences with the Ninja Turtle 4-banger.
Oh, several times.
I can't imagine how much money.
And just going back to your putt-putt story there.
Yeah.
I don't think that parents really got the actual social importance of video, like, of arcade games, and especially of something like Ninja Turtles, where it was 4-player. Right. You know, stuff like the X-Men arcade or Simpsons arcade or like the SpiderMan, where, you know, like, all of these great, like, 4 to 6 player games in, you know, terms of the X-Men one, where it was really easy to I mean, I always kind of thought of it in hindsight as, like, speed dating for gamers, but it's not really a date.
No, I totally get that. Hold
but,
that
you know,
thought.
like, you'd be playing some game and somebody else would come up and go, hey, can I join in? And you'd be like, I would love you to. I'm getting killed at this boss right now.
Right. And then later in the arcade culture, the quarter on the shelf for fighting games and shit. I got next and shit.
Oh, yeah, for tournament fighters and whatnot. Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, when we talk about, you know, the social aspect of gaming, like, that was something that we didn't even really truly understand it at the time. We just knew that we were playing the games. We wanted to involve people. Like, it was never like, I never had an active thought of, like, wow, I'm having fun with my, you know, new best friend. It was, I just need help. It was that kid desperation of, like, save me, dude. Exactly. Like, come on. And how many times do you think this happened? Because it happened to me a bunch as a kid, where you think that, like, you think you're making a friend playing the game, and you never see the motherfucker again.
Yep. Like, yeah, that actually happened way more than not. Yeah.
It's weird. Like, I kind of find that, like, I wish that, like, arcades and social media were at the same time. Because imagine how many lasting friendships you know what I mean? Potentially, you know. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to say that there's going to be, like, this lifelong connection to somebody because you played Double Dragon with them in an arcade. But there might be. You never know.
Oh, for sure. And that's, I mean, you know, when, like, with a lot of the games that I brought up, like Spider-Man and X-Men and Ninja Turtles and whatnot, like, there was a whole, like, kids today, I'm gonna date myself here, but, like, kids today don't realize how hard it was to find other people who enjoyed things like Spider-Man and the X-Men.
Oh, God.
It wasn't the culture that we have today, which is just fucking glorious.
Yes, I mean it was something where, like, the thing was, like, you could find people that were into like superheroes in general. You could find people that were into games in general. But to find someone into like your thing, because there'd be these stupid kid arguments you'd get into. Spider-Man's the best, Hulk's the best, and then you wouldn't get along. And it was like, why? Like, it doesn't matter. Because back then everything, like, that's your whole, like, that nerddom as a kid is like politics as an adult. It really is. Like, because that's your whole shit. And you take that shit seriously, like a big poop. That's serious. I don't know that I ever really met anyone that was into Spider-Man as much as I am until like high school. And I know that, like, I certainly didn't run into anybody that was into Godzilla as much as I am until like way later, because I would tell people how into Godzilla was. I was like, that's all right, But the thing is, like, for some reason, all those like qualifiers just go away at the arcade. You got a quarter, you're playing the game, and you're having fun. Like, do you feel that way? Is that something that, like, do you think that maybe there were some barriers that were falling and we didn't even realize it?
In part, yes, because I mean, like, just going back to, like the culture of that time, like it was such a weird thing because, like, as much as there was, the whole, like, oh, you're a Sega kid? Ew. kind of mentality. At the same time, you also had the, oh my God, someone else that actually likes video games. I don't care what you play. I want to,
Right.
play games with you.
And, I feel like with arcades too, like you didn't have to have that kind of a console allegiance because everything was there. Every manufacturer had something at that place.
Well, your allegiance was to your quarter. Like that 25 cents, like, that was important.
Yes.
And, it was, which machine am I gonna play today?
Or the token.
Like, I was always the sort of kid where, like, if I had $1, I'd, play a game here, a game there. And at the very end, I'd always go back to a game that I love.
Right. And it, I think, like...
But that's stressful trying to figure out, like, okay, am I going to play 3 games for $1 or 4 games? Or should I just spend it all on this one and try and get further than I've ever gotten before? Oh, but there's somebody playing this game that I really like, and they're on stage 3.
I've never even seen stage 3. I can hop on with them.
There's so many decisions, and as a kid, like, it's all these weird little things that are the biggest choices in the entire world.
In that moment, yeah. And how about this? That brings up an interesting thing. Let's imagine for the moment that in that instance, that kid's playing level 3 on that game you like, and it's a single-player game, right?
Oh, yep.
So in your brain, you're like, I'm going to stick around and see, like, how far he gets, and when he dies, I'm going to put that quarter in. But if you're a savvy player... There's a trolley thing that almost everyone did, and I did it too. 9, game over. And you're like, no! Because you're eliminating the possibility of anyone piggybacking your shit.
Yeah, that was definitely the arcade version of trolling.
Oh.
Because you'd see somebody, out of the corner of your eye, like, just waiting. And they'd be like, oh, fuck, I can't wait to continue from this point.
Nope.
You're just like,
nope.
I'm gonna put my initials in.
It's the highest score I ever got. Meanwhile, you're already number 1 and you're putting in for number 3 and you're like, today. The highest I ever got today. And it goes like, fuck. With fighting games though, like that opened up a whole other thing, and that really became a big deal in the early 90s. Because like there was like Nintendo kind of created this, not a slump in the arcades, but like they couldn't just put out the same games anymore. Like I saw a Super Mario Brothers arcade game at Putt Putt one time, and I was like, why would I play this? I have a friend that has a Nintendo. I can play it for nothing. Like why? Like why would I do that? Or the Play 10 or whatever, which all they did was put a coin op mechanism on the demo from like Toys R Us or some shit. And you're like, that's low as shit. But all right, fine, whatever. And all it was a time limit based on your quarter. And it's like, so like, for roughly 400 of these quarters, I can play this shit forever. So you can eat a dick.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, just with the Play Choice 10, because I remember there was one in my local, like, video store.
Yeah.
Where I used to rent games from all the time. And they'd consistently switch out games for new ones that you could rent.
But they didn't charge you, did they?
Yeah, it was still 25 cents. But 25 cents to be, you know, here's 3 minutes to see if this game that I want to play is worth renting or not.
In that context, I totally get it. But in an arcade, fuck off.
In an arcade, when you're surrounded by everything else, like, especially, you know, like the Sega Nintendo dichotomy is so weird.
Yeah. Because
Nintendo was king of the consoles, but Sega had the arcade wrapped up.
Like, you know, the first time,
especially with stuff like Space Harrier or the afterburner cabinet that you could sit in, and the chair would move, and it would
super hang
rock
on
back and forth when like you when your plane exploded. And
yes.
Super hang on where you got on the motorcycle and you were like going back and forth like that. What kid didn't do that when they were playing a game just holding a controller?
Yep.
So to be able to like, okay, I'm on an actual like
thing,
as actual as possible, you know, motorcycle, and here we fucking go.
Which brings me to an interesting point. I'm gonna kind of fast forward and come back for a second. Did you ever, after learning how to drive, go back and try to play hard driving?
Yes.
That game is dog shit. It's not real. It's not. It's not real. I could barely drive it as a driver. Barely.
Well, and see, that's a good game to go off on another tangent here.
Let's do it, dude.
Because like in hindsight, you know, like now with I love the PS3 because of how many arcade games it gave me that I never thought I was going to have again.
Yes, I have to agree with that.
But as for, you know, like arcade ports, you know, stuff coming out for the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis at the time, like, I loved the Super Nintendo port of Street Fighter 2.
Yes, it was very good.
But compared to the arcade game, it sucks.
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely terrible. All the characters have been scaled down so that, like, a lot of the combos and stuff that you'd learn in the arcades wouldn't work because everyone had a different sized hitbox.
Yep.
But you don't realize that as a kid. You're just like, oh, I get to play Sunset Riders on my Super Nintendo.
Right. And that's like when you look at, like, last time we told a story about consoles and how the whole reason I bought a PlayStation was so I could practice arcade games. Because at this time, I worked in an arcade. And I had the coolest job. And I've told you the story like 2,000 times because it's that cool. I was like a secret shopper in an arcade. And what that was that you would play the games, the fighting games. You'd basically keep those clear and keep the money flowing. And so, like, for example, if one kid was hogging a title or he was like playing on a long quarter, my job was to beat that kid, get him off, to either get him to spend another quarter or move on. And that was the main job, because you got one guy and there's a line of people. There's a whole revenue stream that's being ignored at that point. So, but what ended up happening is kids eventually catch on, then you just have to become an associate. They eventually figure it out. But I had the PlayStation, so when I was at home, I could just practice combos and shit, because on the PlayStation ports, it's 1-to-1. Like, you're not missing anything at that point. At least
depending, like the PlayStation ports and that generation definitely did have, because the characters were all the right size. But it's the little things like missing animation frames and stuff like that.
Sure.
It definitely a lot less noticeable.
Yeah.
But also still definitely something where like that's why arcades really were so what good. Made the arcade so good for so long was it was really hard to find that 1-to-1 conversion. And you brought up the original PlayStation, so like one of the launch titles was a perfect arcade port, the Raiden Project.
Yes.
Fucking fantastic port.
And this was one of those things where for 3, almost 4 generations, we were told arcade blah 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 blah. This was the first time that it actually happened. And it was really interesting, and I find. And
I mean, granted, not that Raiden or Raiden 2, either of them are like the most graphically intensive games, but really like it's very hit or miss up until about the Dreamcast port of the original Soul Calibur or Soul Edge. Sorry,
at that point it was Soul Calibur. Like it would go Soul Edge, and then they just jumped to Soul Calibur.
But that was the first, at least in my mind, better than arcade port.
Yeah, because it was actually smoother than the arcade. Because at that point, if you had the right equipment at home, you could get a better refresh rate and so forth than what you were getting in these arcades, because they didn't really put the best displays in the arcade, not really. Or sometimes because they were trying to compete with home, you'd have this big screen. Well, it was an awesome, huge rear projection screen, but it had a shitty refresh rate.
Yeah,
and you didn't realize that at the time. Then you get the game like Soul Calibur at home, and you're like, "Fuck, that's crazy." But like, I almost see it in reverse now, in a sense. Where like the only arcade game I'd heard anything about in the last few years was Tekken 7 or Tekken 6 even. Like that's the only arcade game I heard anything about. And I honestly feel like the arcade versions of those games, especially in Japan, are like play testing for the home version they're going to release a year later.
Yeah, I can see that.
Like they're working out they're like gathering aggregate data and then saying, okay, how can we make this better on a home console? How can we optimize this? And it's like, that's fucking really smart. And I wish there were more arcades so you could do that again, because again, now it's a 1-to-1 from here on out pretty much, unless they start putting supercomputers in the goddamn arcades. So I promised you some new stories when I pitched you this idea. So 2 years ago, as a matter of fact, like, just to give you an idea of the time frame, right? I get home from my mom's funeral, and I'm home for about a week and a half, and then this arcade opens up down the street. It's like this posh, hipster kind of thing where like they have pizza, but it's like served on like bread made from the tears of like old goths and shit. Like, I don't know. Like it's like super pretentious. Like they're fried pickles. Like the way they word it, like it's just fried pickles, but they like have like this term for it, like pickled cucumber, breaded fried penis edge. I don't know what the fuck it was, but like it was super hipster. Craft beers. It's a bar, but they have like a shitload of pinball machines and a shitload of arcade games. So I was like, I'm going to go there and I'm going to get wasted. I was in my, we're going to go out. I don't want to be at home. I don't want to be with anybody. I just want to go out and get wasted stage of grief. That's a real stage of grief. Don't dispute me. So I took a cab to this place. I was there with Bennett. And I proceeded to get wasted and play video games. It was amazing. And I was talking to the owner for like a half hour because he was like, he could tell because I'm older. He's like, you appreciate this? I'm like, yes, I do. They had, I think they had a Virtua Fighter. They had a Terminator pinball machine, which was cool. They had an Addams Family pinball machine, which was cool. Dig Dug. They have like a Zaxxon. You know, Road Blasters. They had that. Well, I was like, nice. Yeah. And then he motions. He takes me to a corner, and he pulls a cover off. And then he goes, bing! Fucking Ninja Turtles 4-banger.
Nice.
They were still cleaning it and like restoring, like the two joysticks on the right needed to be restored a bit. He just only play these two, but it looked really good. It was a little dingy, but it's fucking Ninja Turtles, dude. Cowabunga! I'm like, I know this.
Well,
hang
it's
on,
also
April.
Like 30 years old,
right? And I was in seventh heaven, dude. And the thing is, like, I can fire up my Xbox 360 right now and play a perfect port of that. It's not the same. Like, it is the same, but it's not. Man,
there's something to be said about like the feel. You know, like you brought up like the sandy feeling arcade cabinet. Like, there's something about and fight sticks don't even do it for me.
Yeah,
as an alternative, but you know, like there's something about the feel of having, you know, one hand on that joystick and the other on top of the buttons, and it's just a different experience.
And I've played like the really expensive ones, and those are a really good approximation. But if I'm sitting down, it's not the same.
Exactly.
It's not.
Like you need to have that whole like recreation of it, and like that's why I really appreciate like what these I guess they call them barcades are trying to do. I mean, it's kind of weird now as an adult to be like, yeah, I want to go play some arcade games and get a beer, and I can do it.
Yeah. and the thing is, like, what if they had one of those damn afterburner carts, man? You know, like you just see some asshole throwing up all over the floor and shit.
I'd love to see somebody fall off a super hang-on bike.
Oh. Okay, if I ever open a bar, I promise you I will do this. In one corner of the bar, there will be 2 breathalyzers, because you can do those. You can have a free breathalyzer at your thing, just for fun, right? 2 of them. And on the right side, you've got super hang-on. On the left side is hard driving. And I would actually, and if there was a way that I could wire it to where you have to be legally drunk to play the game, I would do that. It would be amazing. Like, you have to be legally drunk. You have to be above the legal limit to play these games. You know, obviously we'd have to take your keys.
Just replace the coin slot with the breathalyzer.
Pretty much, dude. That would be amazing. And for me, it would be like, you know, obviously you have to take their keys. If they're like, I'm going to try for that, well, give me your keys. And then so you want everyone to be safe. You'd offer to pay them a cab, whatever. But and then stream that shit. You know, fucking like, you know, it'd be fucking cool.
Yeah, just have a little sign by it, like, just so you know, there's a camera pointing right at you while you're playing this.
Right.
No pressure.
I would probably put like a disclaimer on the door, like you're being filmed at all times. You know, and by entering these premises, you are consenting to that being broadcast and shit, you know. Something like that. Like I would make it known. I would think I would make that a known thing. Like, this is a stream bar. Like, every game you're playing can be streamed at any point. In other words, it's a gigantic multicam production with just some nerd in the back on OBS going, camera 1, camera 3, camera 2, camera 6. Zoom in on the big tits. Camera 6. Camera 1. Tits. You know, I feel like there's a market for that. Especially when one considers that, like, Kinga, who's a pretty big Twitch streamer, one of the biggest, started out in the Destiny and Borderlands community, and now he's kind of branched out a bit. And he and his business partners, because one of the things, if you're really, really lucrative on Twitch, like super lucrative, you need to spend money to lower your taxes, basically. In other words, the more you spend on expenses, like, so his account's like buy shit. So at one point, what he did, this is so genius, he took this little nook room in the center of his house that they weren't using for anything. It was like, I guess it would have been for laundry or something. It's like smaller than this. It was about the size of this room, so not huge. He remodeled the whole thing. And the door to get in is this bookshelf. So you just to get into it, and he calls it the speakeasy. And with an easy. He's got like a little like booth in there where you can just sit and have a beer. He's got a kegerator in there, like so you have like a tap pull, wine cooler, and all that shit. But he also has this gigantic arcade cabinet that has like every game in it. Like not just MAME, but everything. Like every console up to like PS1, pretty much. And it's all in there, and it's beautiful. And then you just see him scrolling through all the games. You're like, Jesus Christ, you know, it's a lot of shit. And then like in the closet outside of the room, he's got like all the capture cards and the PCs and any consoles, because he can play any console on any TV in there and shit. You know, chat is over there. So when they stream from this room once a week, it's really it's a really neat concept. It's something that like. It's like, wow, like always that thing. If I had enough money, I would. He's absolutely done this. And the thing is, because there's so much, it's a small enclosed room. And there's all this electronics. He had to install a special air conditioner to cool the place, which then ups his electric bill, which ups his cost of operating, which lowers his taxes. It's a really genius racket, to be honest. And it's a cool way of monetizing having a beer with your business partners every week. I tell you that much.
Yeah, really.
Because the beer becomes an expense too, because we're drinking it for the stream. It's for your entertainment. So you can, like, I don't know if you can actually write that. I'll have to ask Gigi. But, you know, that kind of thing. Like, I feel like there's a flexibility now to where you can pretty much do whatever you like. Like, I have the Vive over here, which to me is a very arcade-like experience. In as much as I'm standing up, I can play almost any game that I want, within any type of game anyway, and play it in a way that's more interactive than sitting at the desk. If you want to avoid the cameras, either stay away or hide in the toilets.
Well, we got a surprise for you, Tom.
Exactly.
There's cameras in the bathrooms, too.
It sounds like a refrain for a hip hop song. Cameras in the bathroom too. Cameras in the bathroom. What? I don't know. Sorry, I can't not do that. That's horrible. That's bad. So getting back, I promised we'd come back. So getting back to like, you know, consoles had kind of created a sort of competition between arcades and console. So, and up until that point, it was basically you put out the arcade game and you bring it home. Well, then there was a whole companies of development and publishing that were only doing console games, and that market was pretty much wrapped up tight with the occasional arcade port or so forth. I think around maybe 88 in particular, like right around that time, I think that the arcade game manufacturers started getting wise to the fact that like if we want people to come in and play these games, they've got to be better and different. So that's where your multiplayer games came into play. That's where honestly the Tournament Fighter was born because of that, I think.
Well, yeah, there's definitely a big split between like the early arcades, and I mean, I remember hearing stories, but like I don't recall, you know, just the seediness and like all the 80s arcades weren't a place for kids to be about.
In the late 70s,
90s
early 80s.
arcade games, definitely.
Right. So like,
but there, you know, like there was this big renaissance in terms of, you know, like the manufacturers going, okay, you know, like we have a real chance to stand out compared to what the consoles are doing.
Sure.
Whereas, like with the 70s, 80s ones, it was still just, like high score games where, you'd go in, you'd try and get the high score, and that's it. And like I've heard from the stories, like that was the place where you'd go to like get your grams of weed.
Right. I mean, the dedicated arcade versus like the Chucky Cheese or the Putt-Putt. I don't know that I ever went to like a regular arcade that wasn't in a mall until I was older. And the arcade in a mall that's like that's really like, bubblegum kind of shit. You have your skee ball machines, and I always wanted a skee ball machine in my house until I realized that like if I live with anybody and I have a skee ball machine, like the temptation to just throw one of those balls at somebody if I got mad. It's too much. Be like, shut up, like I'm not a violent dude. I would never do that, but like, it's like Ice-T talking about like some people, like if they hold the fork, like I could take this fork, stick it in my eye, like, not everything. So yeah, I agree with you that there was a divide in the target market at first. There was these other businesses that kind of had that in mind, where it was Putt-Putt or Chucky Cheese birthday shit or whatever. Like, I want to have heard the pitch. Okay, arcade games, kids play them. Let's give them a wholesome environment. Let's give them some pizza. They love pizza, and robot rodents singing to them. I was like, wait, you're what? Like, yeah, like robots, like they're actually gonna sing like that? No, not like that. But I was just, why?
No, not like that. A little worse than that. But you get the idea.
Oh, did you ever go to one of those places like where like the mouse was starting to break down a bit? Well,
yeah, and you'd see like half the plastic on the face was cracked, or yeah, that's where the nightmares come from.
It puts the lotion in the goddamn basket after that shit. I'll tell you what, just awful. I remember when I first got to Chicago. Side story. When I first got to Chicago, I was in a band called DOTAC, which stands for Disciples of the Antichrist, which was like straightforward. Like, fair enough. Like, no question about what this band's about. So I'm driving to practice, and to get to practice, I had to pick up the guitar player who did not have a car at the time. So I'd pick him up. And to get to his place, I'd always pass a Chucky Cheese. And when we'd pass back to go to rehearsal, I'd always say, I have a feeling that no matter what we do, we'll never be as evil as that place. He's just like, I'd be like, He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, just, never mind, dude. You fucking don't get it. It's fine. Whatever. And I never went into that place either. Like, I was just like, there's still an open Chuck E. Cheese somewhere in the United States in the 21st century. I don't want to know what goes on in there. Like, I imagine I would go in there and like Chuck himself would be at the door like, what do you want? I got lewds. I got heroin. What do you need? You want bitches? I got them in the back.
Pick your poison, then we'll throw you in the ballroom.
And it's a ballroom, all right. Not the one you're used to. This took a dark turn. Ugh. I mean, I set him up, you knock him down. It's fine. It's good. But I feel like these retro, these barcades, as you call them, like, I don't know if they're the future, but I feel like they could be. Like, I wonder...
I mean, just in terms of and I know this is something that we've talked before on different shows, but barcades are really good for that sort of preservational aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Like before MAME became, well, even before it became big, before MAME was even a thing. Like arcades are the hardest portion of video games for that preservational aspect.
Yes.
Like you can have a complete collection of NES or Super Nintendo cartridges.
You're not going to get a complete collection of arcade cabinets.
Or even just the boards.
It's nigh impossible.
And it's something where, like I love to revisit the past in terms of all these games that I've played. And now with with the mentality of an adult, looking at them again and going, okay, why did I enjoy this? And sometimes it's a lot harder to do with arcades because it's really hard to find the games. But that's why, like I said earlier, that's why I love that to me was the draw of the PS3 and the Wii, is because they were offering me arcade games. And I was like, okay, you sold me. Because, at that point, like before the Wii and PS3, I was out of video games for quite some time.
Which is weird to say out loud because I can't imagine a you that doesn't play video games, but I get it because I was the same way for a while.
Well, yeah, it just kind of happens hand in hand with, you get to the age where things like music and playing in a band with people become a lot more important than sitting around and playing Super Mario World. So I had kind of fallen out, although that was also the time of me, first getting into PC gaming. But I feel like the stigma of, PC gaming's not the same it's completely gone. In 2018, it doesn't exist. Like, if playing a game on computer is exactly the same as playing it on the PS4 or the Xbox One.
Mm-hmm. Arguably better in some cases too, and that obviously it's not to get into that slippery slope of an argument.
No, but just to to cap off that thought, like that to me was what drew me back in. And I don't know, it was really neat to be able to have the Simpsons arcade game because that was one of the few treasures that just never got ported.
Yeah, it for it to just suddenly pop up there on Sony is like what?
Yeah, in hindsight, like that was a game that I would have totally accepted. Smaller sprites, less advanced.
Yep.
Because it wasn't a graphically intensive game to begin with.
Would have been great in the Super Nintendo. Would have been perfect.
Yeah, it was just one of those games where I couldn't figure out why it never got a port. Well, money and licensing and whatnot, but the Simpsons were so hot at the time that if you had the choice between the Simpsons arcade game and every other Simpsons game that they'd made, the choice is obvious.
The Simpsons arcade, it's a beat 'em up with fucking Simpsons, and it's perfect.
I know people like Bart versus the Space Mutants and Bart's Nightmare, but they're terrible games.
They're
always
honestly
have been. Just fucking the only Simpsons game that I've ever enjoyed was and I always confuse the two because there were two that came out on the PS2. There was the Hit and Run and Road Rage. And one of them's really good, and one of them's not so good.
I think whichever the first one was.
They're similar enough that I just confuse them both in my head.
Well, then you fast forward now to they've the console market moved towards games you could not have in the arcade, in the same way that arcade games had previously moved to games you could not have at home. So you don't have a South Park arcade game. You've got a South Park fucking RPG. Two of them were gigantic and perfect.
Yeah.
And you'd never have that in the arcade. So my question becomes okay, how do you innovate in the arcade space? And you broken record, guilty as charged, VR, dude, because that's one of the biggest markets for VR is these arcade places, like especially in China and Korea, Japan, to a lesser degree Europe, and there are these places like a Dave and Buster's or whatever, where like a larger joint and they have like exclusive games and shit. I feel like that is going to be, at least for a while, they're going to find a niche. They're going to figure it out. First person to like franchise a VR arcade in North America, and do it in a format that is lucrative financially in some way. It's going to take off for a few years, and then you figure maybe 10 years from now, VR will be as common in households as a console or a PC gaming. We're not too far off from that now. It's a matter of creating that mainstream popularity, and I think arcades are the way to do that. VR arcades, if you will. If someone patent that, if they haven't, VR arcade, VR arcades. Because I do feel like that's where it's at. I don't know how you would do that exactly, other than it being a cover charge, and then you get to play for X amount of time, on whatever you want, I guess.
Play Choice 10 model.
Yeah.
See, it all comes back around.
It does on some level, man. And when you look at some of the games that were the most successful in the early days of like the Vive and the Oculus, they're fucking arcade games at heart. There's a game called Space Pirate Simulator, which is you standing on a floating platform as all of these like little drones come around and shoot at you. You gotta dodge, and then you gotta shoot at them. And you have like two different guns and shit. Like it's like super arcadey, like so arcadey. It's not even funny. Like why am I have a ship behind me? Why am I standing here? Why am I not just getting in the ship and saying fuck you and flying away? Like it's like this is a premise that only exists for the sake to support the game mechanics, and I accept that. And there's plenty of other games like that where it's just like this makes no sense, but the mechanics are fucking amazing, fun. Would you go up with that?
Well, I'd say that it's very true that an arcade would need to do something like that in today's market just to survive. Just because, going back to earlier in the conversation, you'd mentioned that the arcade market was very different from the console market.
Yes.
And they both drove each other to do better. Mm-hmm. Because, with the consoles, it was always like the desire to get to that arcade point.
Yes.
And with arcades, it was always the desire to stay better than what the consoles could provide, or at least something different.
Mm-hmm.
And, that feeds back into everything. Like going back to, like the old computer games. While they didn't necessarily have, the sort of games that the NES did, just because like early computers weren't very good at scrolling.
Right.
So, like they had to think about like, what can we do that's different from what they do? And I mean, the big thing about old computer games, now that I've had a chance to go back to some of them, is things like resolution.
Yes.
Take a game, for like the old MSX computer, like Metal Gear,
sure,
which got an NES port. The NES version is, I don't remember the exact dimensions now, but like NES games run at like 230 by 230-ish.
Right around there, yeah.
I don't remember the exact details, but you play that game on the MSX, it's 600 by 400.
Which is a huge difference.
So presentation-wise, they were able to offer something that you just couldn't do on the consoles.
Right.
the arcades did the same thing in terms of graphics, in terms of sound. Like it's amazing to hear an arcade game compared to a Super Nintendo port, because all the audio gets bit crushed.
Yeah, and never mind the fact that like a lot of those cabinets have really good speaker systems in them. Like that cannot be understated. So you know, fast forward 20, 30 years where I'm playing Robocop on, you know, an emulation of it, but through my surround system in here, because I have speakers behind me. Like, people forget that, but I almost cranked it. And stop all shoot, you know, all that shit. Like, it's like, and like my subwoofer has got me in trouble with the neighbors before, so I don't do it too often. But I did it at a time when I knew they were gone. So I was like, I'm just trying to, yeah, we're gone. It's so much fun, you know, because, and that's a big part of it. Like, if there was an experience that I would love to be able to have on tap, and I know you're going to tell me a way to do this. I already know. All right. So it's walking through a mall and then slowly hearing the arcade noises get louder and louder and louder.
Yeah, and I mean that's exactly it. Is the arcade was a full, you know, sound, sights, fortunately or unfortunately, smells. Like if I don't know, if you weren't there, like you honestly don't know.
It was an experience.
You know, like I'm not trying to say that as like, oh, look at me, I have all this arcade experience, but it
put that on your resume, see what it gets you.
But I mean, it's that sort of thing where, like, if you've never been to France, you can see pictures of the Eiffel Tower, but it's not the same as seeing it in person.
Yo, fuck you. I've played Twisted Metal too. I know all about the Eiffel Tower. All right? I'm all about that shit. All about it, bro. All about it. But like, for me, the big thing will always be that point you just made, where the arcade, top to bottom, back to front, all your senses, was an experience you cannot replicate. There is the Anarchy Arcade thing that you introduced me to a couple years back. It is compatible with the Vive. I haven't messed with it yet.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Because the reason I haven't messed with it is that the controllers, like these handheld doodads, like you're supposed to use them, and I'm like, because I would want to like have an arcade, one of those nice $200 arcade sticks on like a stand and be like, all right. And then at that point, it's like, if you're going to surround your room with a bunch of those to play an arcade game in virtual reality, it's like, no, it just doesn't, no, it's not going to happen. But I really think that that's the whole overarching point. We can talk about industry trends. We can talk about the console wars. We can talk about VR and the future of arcades. At the end of the day, going into a carpeted room, those carpets were always dirty. I think they shipped out dirty. I don't know.
Yeah, and they were always like the tiniest, like flattest carpets you could. Like, I imagine that they started out being stomped on.
Did you ever fucking like trip and fall in one of those places? Like, you would have needed a skin graft after that. You're like, ah! Client down by Frogger, send help. You know, fucking like that's a real thing. But that's not, you don't hear about that at a GameStop or a Dave & Buster's or one of these hipster places. It's not the same thing. And that's one of the things that I had said. This is great, but it's not the same. And maybe it's some rose-colored glasses. I don't give a shit. But, like, there was something about walking into an arcade because, and I think, go with me here, when you were a kid and your mom gave you tokens or $1 or whatever the currency is for that particular arcade, right? And says, go have fun. That, as a kid, was some of the most freedom you would ever experience in your life. You were making buying decisions. You were playing you were doing exactly what you wanted to do, and you were free to be a kid, period. And that's something
sorry to cut you off. We just got a comment that I don't really know anything about.
Me either.
Maybe a good topic is FreeSync on Xbox. I'm not sure what FreeSync is, but after the show, I'll definitely go check it out.
I'm guessing FreeSync is technology regarding like monitors and display in terms of like it's versus G-Sync, so it's like AMD versus NVIDIA. So I'm not sure I could talk about that for an hour on any level. I would definitely encourage someone at AMD to talk about that for an hour. But I appreciate the input nonetheless. But, although we did talk about refresh rate and shit earlier in the podcast, I'll cop to it, okay? But it was like 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I don't know. For me, I don't get too much into the technicals of things. It's the feels in my heart that it gives me.
Yeah, when you started talking about resolution and pixels, I was like, who the fuck is this?
But I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's the sort of thing where, I get that, and I've seen living proof of it where, a 60 frame per second game plays a lot better than a 30 frame per second game. But the most eye-opening experience I had with that recently was playing Borderlands 2 on my my PS3, and then when I got my computer fixed again, going back to it on PC, and it feels like a different game. Yes.
My most recent on that is Destiny 2. Going from 30 frames per second locked on console, and if I don't have my OBS open, if I have OBS open, I've got to kind of choke it down to 60. But if I don't have OBS open, I can run that bitch at 200 frames a second. And granted, I have a 60 hertz monitor, but I'm telling you, it is still smoother by a lot. Even though it can't display the refresh, there's just more frames in there. So there's less chance of losing any information at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not the sort of person where, I won't play this game because it only plays at 30 frames a second. But I will be the first one to testify that you can feel the fucking difference.
You certainly can. It's definitely a big thing, and in today's market with with streaming being what it is, like right now we're streaming at 30 frames per second. I normally stream at 60, and the only reason we're doing it is because I'm not going doing breakdance ninja moves and shit. You don't need that on a podcast.
Not on this stream anyway.
No, I'm not.
Check out Jim's breakdance kicking podcast coming up soon.
Check out Jim's hospital bill growing in front of your very eyes. Film at 11, Jesus Christ. But yeah, it definitely feels good to go from 10 to 80 frames, and what's interesting, for example, when you're playing an emulated game on PC, for example, you're playing on equipment that is at a higher quality than what was originally intended. So, for example, Ninja Gaiden, I have to relearn to play the game because I'm not playing on a CRT monitor at that point. I'm playing on... So the smoothing is different, the emulation, it's all different. So I certainly want to, at some point, get a CRT and do this properly and all that shit. But I don't know that... Again, it just goes back to the original thing that I was trying to wrap things up with. Is that there's certain things that you can never recreate, and if you didn't experience it in the time that it was prevalent, you probably will never fully understand it. But that was what made arcades special, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for talking to me about arcade games today. We have to figure out what the next step in the evolution is. I'm not sure yet, guys, so we'll figure it out later. But as far as the episode goes, that's what's in Grindhead this week. Troy, thanks for stopping by, brother.
Oh, anytime.
He is Skeletroy everywhere. Links will be in the description if you're watching on YouTube or listening on Anchor or on iTunes. Take care, guys. Cheers.